I am thrilled to be here today with three women who have really written their own rules to create success and make an impact that crosses borders and communities. As Moira laid out earlier, this is a watershed year. Women and men are increasingly saying, the old rules do not work. Are we at a point in time where breaking the rules is exactly what is needed? Don't be too ambitious. Don't take too up space. I'm not important. Draw inside the lines. Women businesses are niche businesses. Women aren't funny. Women don't break bank. How many of you are ready to break these rules? All right. The women I'm speaking to today have really gone beyond your average rule breaking to disrupt industries, create new career paths, and build connections that never would have existed before. What can we learn from them to defy the status quo and succeed together? Anjula Acharia is a partner at Trinity Ventures with a little side hustle as manager of Priyanka Chopra. Anjula has defied labels and expectations for defining what is within your reach. Shortly after moving to the US, she created the first of its kind fusion entertainment platform, breaking 250,000 downloads within weeks, before iPhones or apps existed. The boundary-breaking platform, Desi Hits, brought Lady Gaga to the East and Desi Music to the West, and eventually Priyanka Chopra as well, expanding global markets and breaking South Asian stereotypes. When music mogul Jimmy Iovine invested in her and saw her ability to see what's next in culture, she went on to invest in others, including ClassPass, The Muse, Thrive Cosmetics, Health Aid, Bulletproof, and more, really forming an incredibly diverse portfolio and a portfolio career. And then Julie, sorry, my order is off here. Francesca Ramsey, we're thrilled to have her here with us today as well. She's a comedian, activist, YouTube personality, and author of the recently published book, Well, That Escalated Quickly, Memoirs and Mistakes of an Accidental Activist. There were no rules for how to be a social media activist when in 2012, her YouTube parody video, Shit White Girls Say to Black Girls, went viral. Then, a graphic designer at Ann Taylor, she was thrust into conversations on what racism means and had to create her own precedents on how to deal with her insta-fame as an activist and the trolls that came along with it. She went on to hone a unique brand at the intersection of social justice and comedy and expand to issues like xenophobia, classism, mental health, and more on her MTV show Decoded, and more. This quote I found says it really well, I think. There is no true precedent for Ms. Ramsey. Her career built around her, like a constellation, with activism as her North Star.
Thank you.
And then we have Julie Wainwright, who is the founder of The Real Real and CEO. And she is breaking rules of traditional luxury and dusting off consignment to the tune of at least a $450 million valuation. She is playing by her own rules, coming back after a public ride, growing and then closing early internet favorite Pets.com as CEO to shatter stereotypes about what a high-growth founder looks like. Unless that founder is a 60-something-year-old woman and the hoodie is a Gucci cape. So rule breaking. Rule breaking is something that, we're told early on not to, to follow the rules by fairy tales, by textbooks, by society, really. But some people don't follow those rules. Did you find it was something that was born in you, or was this something that you built a muscle for rule breaking?
I think for me it was born out of adversity. I grew up in a really, really racist environment. I wasn't really accepted as a child because I was a girl of color. And I just realized that because I had so much racism aimed at me, nobody was playing by the rules. Because morally, in those times, I'm going to show my age now, but in those times, the racism that was aimed to me was actually acceptable. Like, people were allowed to call me names, people were allowed to treat me differently. Kids didn't want to hold my hand at school because they thought the color was going to come off. And so morally, I was like, well, they're breaking all the rules. Like, that's not right. I shouldn't be treated like that. But, society at large at that time kind of accepted it. Like, my parents told me to ignore it. My parents told me, like, that's life kind of thing. So I think that I learned very early that everybody else was breaking the rules, so I should. And then to get what I need, just to get through the day at school, sometimes I would break the rules just because I wasn't accepted. So I think for me, it was just born out of adversity.
It's a bit of a survival.
Yeah,
mechanism.
right.
Yeah. How about
It's funny. When I was home, my mother and I were going through old pictures and drawings, and I found a letter from my second grade teacher, Sister June Mary, to my mother, saying that I talked way too much in class and to please speak to Francesca about her behavior. And I think when she said in the letter, when she confronted me, I said, I don't know, sometimes these things get into me and I can't control myself, which I thought was so funny as a second grader, but also very honest. I've always been someone that spoke my mind, even if it wasn't always appropriate at the time. And so I feel very fortunate that I had parents that encouraged me to express myself and to learn when you kind of have to bend those rules to speak out of turn. And similar to what you're talking about, I think it's really important to talk about what rule breaking looks like for women of color. Because oftentimes, I know I've been in situations, and I'm sure you have as well, where we speak up for ourselves and suddenly it's like, you're so angry. And I'm like, I'm not angry, I'm smiling. And they're like, calm down, why are you screaming? And I'm like, my voice has not raised at all. And so I think we have to make sure that we can be allies to each other and create spaces where we are allowed to break the rules, because the rules do not exist the same for all of us.
No.
And so the same is true when it comes to LGBTQ folks, when it comes to people with disabilities. There are certain confines for those groups where people don't feel comfortable seeing people move beyond those things. And so as women, we have to acknowledge that we have the ability to speak up for ourselves, but also to lend a hand so somebody else can speak up as well.
I think also, just to add to that, I don't know if you felt this way, but even as like such a young girl, I felt like I was part of a revolution. Like, I thought the world was so unjust, and like I felt like I had to create this revolution myself. So breaking the rules, I knew, was the only way to do that, you know?
So for me, I actually, I always find, and I still find it, because I'm the oldest one on the panel, every time I break a rule, it's like it never occurred to me that rule was there. And I've done this, when I look back, there have been a couple times. I also got "she talks too much" on my report card in kindergarten. So talkative, exclamation point. But the other thing was, we moved school systems when I was 11 or 12, so think middle school. And during that time, we were studying social issues, and during that time, it was also part of the racial riots going on. So if you think about what was going on, and people were being bused, so it was forced integration. So I thought it would be a great time to understand the impact of forced integration on people's racial views and their biases. So I developed a survey to be fielded in schools that were integrated and non-integrated with the help of my social studies teacher. So 2 different school systems. So I'm 11 years old. I was called by both school systems. I had to meet with my parents with a panel of which I was threatened to be thrown out of both school systems, and that this would never be fielded. Now think about it. I'm a young kid, I'm 11, all these big teachers, I was there with my parents, and I'm thinking, I really want to know, what's the impact? Why is this a big issue? It never occurred to me that adults would be afraid of understanding this issue. So my parents left it up to me if I wanted to field it, knowing that we'd have to find yet another school system. And I caved. But so that was my first instance of thinking, this is what's said, this doesn't make sense to me, and then getting smacked down at 11. The good news is I never stopped moving forward. I didn't move forward with that. I think it was like, I think in my 11-year-old brain, I was like, does that mean I have to be on a bus for 3 hours to go to school? Because I was already bused an hour away. So I'm sure it was like a practical thing that overtook me.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, all of you have broken rules. Sounds like at an early age. So what impact would you say, and you all come from different backgrounds and have different, ways that you've really broken rules, but what impact has it had on your professional success and the impact you've been able to have? Because it's really, the fact that you are rule breakers has really impacted a lot of other people.
Yeah, I think for me, I was really fortunate to move into an entrepreneurial space, so moving to Silicon Valley and being in an environment where everybody's breaking the rules, everybody's looking at how do I disrupt an industry, whether that's, when I look at all my founders who I've invested in, just ClassPass, for example, was completely disrupting the fitness industry. And, this was somebody, Paul Kadakia, who's the founder, just came along and showed me this idea that she wanted to build kind of a open table for classes. And at the time, I saw this cultural shift of, I saw a lot of people moving from kind of gym fitness to boutique classes and kind of wanting more variety in their schedules around fitness and not wanting to go to one place and one gym. And, I saw this whole cultural shift. And, I think that I've been really lucky as an individual to fall into this entrepreneurial community where everybody's breaking the rules all the time, and everybody's thought is like, how do I disrupt an industry? So, fitness, I've got some of my beverage companies here, Pop and Bottle and Kombucha Health Aid. Like these, Pop and Bottle, for example, is one of my companies that just said, I hate almond milk that has gums and stabilizers and all this crap in it, and I want to build a clean almond milk. And I was on this quest myself, going plant-based, that I wanted to, back companies that were clean. So I think that, I've just been really lucky to fall into an industry that your success is based on your ability to break the rules and disrupt an industry.
For me, I moved to New York wanting a career in entertainment, and I could not get auditions to save my life. I was doing stand-up comedy, and I really like to go to bed. So I decided that I would start making content on the internet. And so YouTube ended up opening so many career doors for me because I couldn't figure out how to get an agent. I couldn't get auditions, and making videos at home, after work, before work sometimes, on the weekends, was how I actually got my agent. And then that led to me actually being able to leave my job and write for television and now write a book and exec produce a television show and have different shows in development. And so I think we often talk about the internet as a space that is kind of the wild, wild west. There are lots of people that are abusing it and putting out awful messages. But I think the positive side of the internet is it's giving people a place to tell their own stories. And especially as a Black woman, I found that when I did get an audition, it was for a very stereotypical, one-dimensional role. And I knew that I was more than that. So the internet gave me a place to tell those stories, to create characters that I felt spoke to me and aligned with my values. And I think it's so cool to see so many other people using the internet in that same way.
Yeah, it's kind of opening up your own door when you couldn't find the door that was right for you.
So, I think in general, whatever you do, if you're in a traditional role, it's really hard to break rules. It's really hard. So I started my career in brand management at Clorox, and it's a fine organization. But when I started, and I was the second undergraduate they ever hired, and it was like a big deal for them, so they felt like they were taking a risk on me. But when I looked above me, the only women were in HR. And even people that had moved through the brand group got sidelined into HR. And I saw myself thinking, I can't ever stay there. But let me just back up. Before that, I graduated from Purdue. And I knew when I went from Purdue, if I went back, that's in Indiana, in case you guys don't know where it is. And if I went back and worked in Indiana, my life would be in a certain direction. So, and then when I went to Clorox, I was there 3 years, and I knew if I stayed there, my life would be in a certain direction. And you knew by that time I was even savvy enough to understand what it would take on me, what ass I would have to kiss, how I would have to dress. And so I moved into tech very early because I felt like the rules, whatever rules were there, I could help create. And I think when you talk to any woman who's been successful, very few of them have gone up the ladder in the corporate. There's very few female CEOs that started that way. They've all looked for an opening, a new opportunity, Or in many cases, they've been given a company they thought was terrible to turn around. Someone said, oh, let the woman do it. Let this person have an opportunity. And they've made it work. So I would say that, every single time I've figured out a way to get beyond the structure and then do something that would allow me to rise up, because I knew I wouldn't be able to live in I wouldn't be able to do what I wanted to do in a traditional structure.
And it's interesting. I mean, a lot of what you're talking about is disruptive, and rule breaking in business can be sort of like going where nobody else is playing, and it's sort of like you're the ones that, we're not going to play in that sandbox. We're going to go over here and maybe see new opportunities. What gave you that confidence to sort of go make those pivots? You going through that door, or deciding to become this person that's investing in other companies and taking those risks, and opening up a new door yourself.
I have to be honest, I'm not always confident. And I think it's really important to be transparent about that. I think so often we put on this face of like, we gotta be strong all the time. It's like, I'm a crybaby. I love a good cry. And sometimes I'm okay with closing my office door and being like, can I do this? Okay, I got it out, and now I can do it. And so y'all are having a moment. You're like, we cry all the time. I think
it's
that's
okay to cry is the new rule.
I think that's okay. I don't think there's anything wrong with being vulnerable. I don't think there's anything. I would argue that I would be worried if I had confidence all the time, because then I would be like a robot. And I think for me, that little twinge of self-doubt is me saying, I really care about this thing. And this thing is really important to me. And that's why I have a little apprehension. I have a little bit of fear. I think we've all met that person who goes into the work that they do like, I'm perfect, I can get it right all the time. And those are people that are not willing to be flexible and realize that they don't always get it right all the time. Mm-hmm. And so I think for me, I have good days and bad days. I have days where I'm like, I'm really crushing it, I'm doing it. And then I have days where I'm not so sure. But I think for me, what's been important is building a team that supports me, that is honest with me and tells me, like, you deserve to be here. And so those days where I'm not feeling that confident, I don't necessarily think, okay, I can do it. I say, who believes in me? Who believes I deserve to be here? And let me make sure that I can rise to the occasion and prove to them that I deserve to be here. Because confidence is a journey. It's not something that happens overnight. It's a work in progress.
I think for me, so I founded my startup maybe about 10 years ago, and I raised about $7 million from some amazing people, and I had to go out and raise money, right? The first round kind of fell into my lap, and it was really easy. The second round was not easy at all. But one of the things, my startup tested me in so many ways, because it was, one, I had to raise money, and then two, I was literally like pitching the top people in the media industry to give me their celebrities to take them to Asia, and that's how I worked with Lady Gaga and Britney Spears and 50 Cent. But I will tell you, I didn't have the confidence, but I faked it for the longest time. And now I'll say I have a lot more confidence, but I definitely faked it. And the way I would do it was I figured everything was body language. So I remember being in this first meeting. I won't say who it was with, but somebody very notable. And I was dying. Like, I was just so scared, and I felt like the success of my company depended on this relationship. And so what I did was, like, I wanted to sit like this, but instead I was like, I was like this, and I was just like, just being so chill with it. And it was so funny. By the end of the meeting, and I was forcing my body language like this, and by the end of the meeting, I was actually really like that. I was like, because the other person responded to me in a way which was like, they saw how self-assured I was, and then they were kind of like treating me like I was someone. And anyway, so I just kind of feel like sometimes you've got to fake it till you make it. But then what you realize is that, people will treat you like you've made it, and then you'll start believing it, and it's just this like cycle.
It's like the power poses, right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
The funniest thing sometimes now, like, I was sitting here, now I genuinely am pretty confident, and like, I want to sit like this, but this chair's really uncomfortable and I can't do it, but like, I wanted to.
Fantastic.
That's great. So for me, I actually started my own business quite old. I was quite old. Before I started the company, I was the CEO people brought in to fix companies, but I'd never had the guts to start my own company. So at the age of 54, I was unemployed. I was out for a walk with a girlfriend, and I'm like, you know what? I just figured out I'm unemployable. Like, oh. And then I thought, I am not going to get my dream job. I've got to make my dream job, and it's time. And it took until then, and I thought, you know what? And I'm going to do it. And now, this year we'll be over 700 million. Next year we'll be over $1 billion in revenue. So that was 7 years ago. And I would say, so like the thing I'm here to say here is like, you're never too old to find your like best bold self. And I would say really the other thing is Pets.com was such a public failure, and there's still writers that write about it, mostly wrong, but that's okay. But they write about it, and they hold it up as an example, and of course that all fell on me. Once you fail publicly, it's sort of in a weird way, it really frees you to be even better and bolder. So I am confident. If this one failed, I thought, it fails, I'll just do something else. And I just, kept going. But that big failure, which was fairly devastating in my life, freed me up from fear of failure, freed me up from being able to say, I don't care who I meet now. And I do meet a lot of people. I meet them all, big and tall. I'm like, we're just people all trying to figure stuff out. So what I would say is, regardless of your age, be bold, and you can do it because it's in there. Especially if you meet a lot of the entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley who are like 24 to 26. There's honestly, on a grand scheme of things, they may have a brilliant gene and a brilliant idea, but in general, they're like kids, they're babies. So, they're not that smart on many levels. So all I'm saying, if they can do it and raise hundreds of millions of dollars, you can do it at any age.
Very good. And a lot of you were in the back room actually talking about, the way forward and breaking rules, and is now the time to break rules. And often for what a man is for granted is for a woman breaking a rule. And what do you think are some of the key rules, or what advice would you have for people? You said it's hard to break rules, and it came out of adversity a lot of the time. Is there anything that we can do in this time and this watershed moment to any advice on how to get that to take this time and break?
I think to not. I'm always scared of failure. I'm never going to, I've failed a bunch of times, and I will say that, everyone will be scared of failure, but not to let that fear get in the way of failing. And I think that you should expect and be willing to fail. I don't know any of you guys that felt like that you haven't failed at some time, or you said you have, but I think, you grow up as a woman saying, I think most people grow up saying, oh, we shouldn't fail, or you shouldn't fail. And I say to my founders all the time, just fail and fail fast. That's the biggest lesson. When I failed in my first startup, literally I was in a dark hole for probably about 7-8 months. I was literally on my hands and knees in my closet crying, and I was scared to go out and face the world because I'd had such bravado about my company. I'd gone out and been like, it's going to be the most amazing thing. I'm going to have $1 billion exit. And you have to have that self-belief. And what I've noticed that people will forgive you for it. I remember thinking, no one's going to forgive me. Did I sell everybody down the river that I was going to build this big company and I didn't? And are they going to judge me for it? And no, people didn't. They were kind of like, good on you. You tried and you failed and you moved on. It just took me 6-7 months to move on. And now I look back at that time and I'm like, oh, why did it take me 6-7 months? I just think that you got to fail fast and not be afraid to fail. I think that's the biggest thing. And you will be afraid, but don't be afraid, if that makes any sense.
One thing that I've been trying to do more of, and I've been encouraging everyone to do, we talk so often about embracing opportunities and saying yes to things. I think it's just as important to know when to say no. I think especially as women, it's so easy for us to say, okay, oh yes, all right, sure, I'll do that thing, or oh, you want me to stay late? Okay, great. And it's okay to say, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not taking that on. I'm not interested in that relationship. I'm not interested in that opportunity or that project. Especially for me with my emotional energy, oftentimes someone will say like, I'm dealing with this problem and I want to put this on you. And I'm like, not today, Satan. I have other things to do. I'm going to say no, and I'm going to move on. And I think that that is so important. And I think that oftentimes we're afraid to say no because we're afraid of how it will make us look, especially as women, especially as a woman of color. When I say no, people are like, she thinks she all that. And I'm like, I am all that. And that is why I'm saying no. And it is okay. People can be mad and stay mad, right? Mm-hmm. You have to know your worth and know what your time and energy is best for. And then I think the other thing, I loved the comments about failure. Please put that on like a journal or something. I will buy all of them. Failure is important, but what I've been trying to do is to not place my self-worth or my happiness in the things that I can't control. I think it's important to set goals for yourself, but we don't have to set that huge goal that if it doesn't work out, we're going to fall apart. It's okay to say, my goal is I'm working towards, I'm going to do, 3 meetings this week that are potentially going to help me get that big client, rather than saying, if I don't get that big client, I'm a failure. It's like, well, if the big client doesn't happen, how do you pick yourself back up to do the next thing, right? So it's setting goals that have nothing to do with what everybody else thinks about your success or waiting for somebody else to give you an opportunity. It's saying, I am doing the work to get me to the place that I need to be, and maybe I don't get there today, or maybe I don't get there tomorrow, but I'm doing the work to get me there, and that way I can feel good about what I'm doing, rather than taking those failures as setbacks, because the failure is going to happen. It's inevitable.
You said people didn't judge you when you failed. The truth is they judged me, and they judge me every single time. They're still judging me. So here's how I deal with that. First, I let it get to me, and then the next thing I thought, okay, this is going to sound silly, but if I was playing baseball and I was out there swinging, and I had a 50% batting rate, which, by the way, the companies before I'd run had done very well, I would be considered a superstar baseball player. And so screw them. I mean, first of all, I'm out there working hard all the time. The people that are writing about me have never taken a risk in their life. So I had to get angry. I had to give myself a sports analogy. And I had to say, you know what, at the end of the day, this is my life, and how do I want to live it, and what do I want to do, and I'm not done yet. And if I fail again, I'll fail again, but my bet is I won't. And so I had to really pull up all these different pieces of information and look outside myself. And then lastly, I thought, what does a man do? So, right now, because I was part of the dot-com bust, and Webvan had lost $2 billion, and the guy just disappeared. No one wrote about him. I'm like, well, what happened to that guy? And then a reporter said to me, you know why they're doing it? Because you're photo-worthy, and you created a brand. So I would say every woman that puts themselves out there, and if you succeed, you're still going to get stuff thrown your way. And if you fail, it's going to be a different failure than a man. So get used to it, because it's worth it. It's worth it.
Yeah. Well, I think, all of you, with taking rule breaking comes taking risks and failures. So I think, you all for taking those risks and helping us get the courage to do it as well. And as one last sort of really quick rapid fire question, does anybody have a rule that they hope to see is broken in the norm within the next time we get together for the Women's Summit?
Let's start that way first.
I mean, honestly, I would love to see women stop being judged by how they looked and described how they look and their age. All right, think about that. How many times do you read about a man being this or that, or you don't? So I would like for a woman to be judged on what she does, not what she looks like.
Cool.
I liked your comment about getting angry. I think oftentimes anger is seen as a way to dismiss a woman's opinion, and I think it's really important to remind people that anger does not invalidate truth, and oftentimes anger is an essential part of your education. You need to see that I'm really mad about something in order for it to mean as much to you as it means to me. So I would like to see more people be okay with embracing those emotions and realizing that it's okay to cry, it's okay to yell, it's okay to get emotional, because sometimes people need to see that emotion in order to get on board.
Fantastic. One last one.
Yeah, I would just like to see us collectively not believe that only one of us can make it. Like, you know, I always hear, I'm the only woman on a board, I'm the only, you know, female founder. Like, let's just change that narrative of like, we're the only ones, because I think we self-perpetuate and we believe that, and I don't think that's the truth anymore, so.
All right. Thank you. We look forward to next year. That's all right.